Hello everyone, welcome to this week's 0 to 1 session. We're into our fourth month now of doing this, and it's been fantastic so far. The difference that we've had in terms of content shared has been, super exciting. We've had a variety of stories from those who have been in maybe a corporate environment and then they've gone and started their own business venture, or they're going solo as a solopreneur or a fractional executive or someone of that nature, and just the different journeys they have, the experiences they have to share. So that's all been really fantastic so far. We're really excited this week to have Grace joining us on what is probably one of the most important topics, I think, which is, and it's also maybe one of the toughest ones because I think naturally as humans we try not to oversell ourselves in that sense, and might be missing out on really achieving our truest value possible. So we're really excited to have Grace here, and thank you for joining us. And we'll let you kick off. Just last couple of little house rules. Feel free to put any kind of comments or things in the chat. Of course, there is a Q&A button at the bottom. So if you've got any particular questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A. I know that Grace has got quite a bit of content to cover, so I'll sort of leave it up to her whether she wants to break at any point for questions, but otherwise we can do the questions at the end. That doesn't mean that you can't put your questions forward, so please do share them as they come into your mind. Yeah, we'd love to hear more points of view from everyone. So thank you, and over to you, Grace.
Amazing. Thanks, Jamie and Yesus. It's great to be here. So let me just share my,
I'll stop sharing mine.
Sorry.
Go.
All right. Let me share my screen and let me know if you can see my screen. Okay, and I'll just expand it. Amazing. Okay, well, thanks everyone for being here, and really thanks Yasas and Jamie for inviting me. So I'm Grace. I am what I like to say a generalist or a multi-hyphenate. And this is just one of the areas that I'm really passionate about and currently been diving into supporting individuals and founders in. Over the past 20 years, I've spent nearly 12 years plus as an entrepreneur or a fractional leader, and very early in the days as a freelancer. After that, I spent 5 years as the director of community at Meta, and now I'm back to wearing multiple hats, whether it's fractional leadership roles or teaching at universities, and really now sort of diving into more of that coaching with individuals around career and money. So I've been in this space of financial psychology myself since 2014, after hitting my own frustrations, really, and I felt my own glass ceiling around money. And I've worked over the years on my own money mindset and psychology. So this is a topic that's super, close to my heart, and I'm super passionate about. 2 years ago, I became certified as a financial well-being facilitator and educator/coach, although I tend to not like that term, but haven't found another term to use. So what I want to talk about today is pricing, but not in the way that most business talks do. So it's really going to be covering it more from the mindset, from our behaviors, because pricing isn't just about positioning or spreadsheets, and money decisions aren't just about numbers. They're deeply personal and influenced by psychology. When you're a founder or a freelancer, those patterns show up in how you price, how you discount, or how you feel when a client pushes back. So no matter where you're coming from or what kind of business you run, there's something we all have in common, and that is that pricing is incredibly personal. So it's not about tactics today's session. It's really about helping you understand the why behind your pricing habits and giving you some tools to reset from a place of alignment and leadership. It's not about charging more just for more's sake, but it's really about reclaiming the value of your work and how to stop shrinking your prices to fit into someone else's limits. So why does this matter? Well, studies show that 80% of our financial decisions are emotional and not logical. Most of our beliefs were developed in childhood. So when we're pricing, we're not always being strategic. We're actually often reacting from old scripts. And that's why understanding one's financial behavior patterns, or what I like to call your money operating system, is actually the foundation of confident pricing. I've got a few interactive sessions, interactive parts today. And, if there are Q&As, like Jamie said, feel free to put your questions in there and we can touch on it at the end. But I want to just touch on right now what I mean by the term money operating system, or what I sometimes call money OS. What I mean by that, it is really the internal system that drives how you relate to money, both consciously and unconsciously. Your money OS is made up of two key parts: your money DNA or profile, and that's really your natural personality, behavioral tendencies with money, how you act, how you feel, how you do money, what motivates you, what blocks you, and then your money story. That's the narrative that we've all inherited. All of us have money stories. It's the beliefs, the memories, and the messages that you've picked up growing up about what money means for you, who gets to have it, and what it says about you. So together, your money OS influences how you price, what you tolerate, when you discount, and how much you trust yourself when you're talking about money in business. So I want to do a quick check-in. If you want to raise your hand or just nod, I can't seem to see the chat. Okay, I can pop it up here. But if you've ever hesitated before sending a proposal, maybe you felt uncomfortable with your pricing, maybe you've added a few extra like bonuses or more time to just make it feel more worth it, or you've lowered your price before someone's even asked for it. If someone wants to, raise their hands or give a nod, let me know. I'd love to just kind of see, where everyone sits or how everyone has sort of faced something like this in the past.
We've got the reactions on, so there's a few thumbs ups going in there already. I can see. I put mine up as well, to be honest. I've had the same challenge.
Okay, amazing. And feel free to pop it in the chat if you want, just, to say yes, no, or, whatever you feel like sharing in there. The thing is everyone has. I've done all of that too. This is, these are habits that don't just happen because we're bad at business or we're too nice. They happen because we're subconsciously looking for safety. And pricing becomes the battleground where our beliefs about money, value, and approval play out. So back in 2010 to 2013, it was really more of my earlier days of when I first had my first business. I constantly undermined my own value, even though I'd already had experience in the field that I was in. I doubted myself and my inner gut feeling. I felt bad charging clients more. I was comparing myself to competitors. I was looking at other people's rates, and I definitely had imposter syndrome. I really struggled with boundaries. I offered too much for too little, and ultimately I burnt out, all because I hadn't addressed my relationship with money. And I felt like I had to fit into what others were doing, especially when I was starting out. But what I didn't realize actually was that I was borrowing their money limits, other people's money limits, other people's beliefs, and ignoring my own value. What I also didn't realize then was that I wasn't just making business decisions. I was playing out deep-seated, deep-rooted money stories and beliefs that had nothing to do with my actual value or the transformation I was creating for my clients. After doing some of my own work, and that's when I really started to dive into this financial psychology, I started to see that pricing isn't just a number, but it's the reflection of how I related to myself, my own sense of self-worth, and my work. So I want to help you now recognize how these hidden patterns might be affecting your business, your profit potential, and share some practical tools to shift from survival to pricing, so you can really own your value. Okay, before we explore the specific patterns, we all have common money blocks, right? Everyone does. And I want to talk about a little bit more about money blocks, because money blocks are the unconscious beliefs or emotional patterns that create resistance when it comes to earning, charging, or receiving any money or more money. There are those stories running in the background. Maybe there are things like, if I charge too much, I'll lose the client, or, making money and helping people don't go together. And these blocks aren't random. They're patterns that come from those early messages that I mentioned we absorb. But the emotional tone also of the money, like talking about money. So if you grew up in a household where talking about money was hard, or it was always scarce, that also shows up in our money blocks, right? There's also cultural conditioning about wealth, success, what's fair, what does wealth and success mean to you that you've been brought up with, or that we've been brought up with as a society. There's also the money blocks from past experiences where you may have felt guilt or shame or fear around charging or earning. And while they may have protected us at some point, they often create tension in our pricing, in our boundaries, and most definitely in our confidence. So I'm going to talk you through some of the most common money blocks I've encountered over the years, both in myself and others that I've supported. And as I go through them, just notice what feels familiar or emotionally charged, and feel free to pop into the chat, and I'll try and see what's happening in the chat as I'm talking through the different money blocks. But think about what's showing up on a feeling level. What's coming up. So one of the first biggest blocks I've seen, and I felt this and I've experienced this, is I have to work hard for my money. That the impact this has on business is huge. And, oftentimes we end up wearing all the hats, especially as a solopreneur or as a freelancer. We're spreading ourselves thin already. And oftentimes we do it for much longer than we should because we don't necessarily want to invest in something yet. It also shows up as saying yes to work that maybe doesn't align with you, or you're attracting business that's hard and that's time consuming, or you're attracting clients that are hard clients, right? You're over delivering, you're struggling to raise your price and discounting to get sales. So that's the first money block. The next is this fear of success. It's a block that often surprises people. And, we often talk about the fear of failure, but many of us are actually afraid of what happens if things go really well. You wonder why? Well, because success is actually unfamiliar and it brings change and new visibility, new expectations, new dynamics. And that uncertainty can feel threatening, even if it's what we say we want. And as humans, we often cling to the known, even if we're unfulfilled or even if we're unhappy in where we are. And there is comfort in the predictable, and that often outweighs our desire to grow. So deep down, we may fear how success can impact our identity, our relationships, our visibility, our routines. And so we can subconsciously hold ourselves back. Okay, next up is charging because you feel like you're doing good or you're making impact. This is around, especially common for purpose-driven or impact-oriented individuals. And as someone who's an impact-oriented individual, trust me, I've definitely felt this in the past. And I sometimes still feel this money block show up. So we're often taught explicitly or subtly that making a difference and making money shouldn't mix. So charging feels a little bit like a betrayal of our values. And it's common as well for people in the world of social impact to be paid less, right? There's statistically, and it's been researched, that often people who work in the impact space are paid less, not because the work is less valuable, but because as a society, we've internalized the belief that doing good means sacrificing income. But income and impact aren't opposites. And getting paid well can actually help us serve better and, of course, is more sustainable. So the next money block is around perfectionism. So it comes out in a way of, what if I underdeliver? What if I get called out? What if they feel like I'm not doing the value that I was charging them for? And we fear that we'll underdeliver for what we actually want to charge. So we'll end up charging less, or we'll hold back raising our rates, or maybe even launching that new product or a higher ticket offer. So this shows up in somewhat of a bit of a perfection paralysis. Okay, this one where, comes up all the time. You're thinking about raising your prices or quoting something that actually reflects the value of your work. And then there's a little voice in your head that says, no one is going to pay that. Most of the time when we say that, we haven't even actually tested it. We're not speaking from any experience or data. We're actually speaking from fear. And it's not even about the other person. It's about us. It's about our discomfort with that number, because maybe we wouldn't pay it, or maybe we were raised to think that no one should, right? But if you never speak the price, they'll never get the chance to say yes. And every price has a buyer. There is always a buyer for some level of price. Okay, so this is one that hits a lot of service-based founders. If I want to make more, I'm going to have to work double or I'll have to work harder, right? Similar to the first money block, but this is really around sometimes making more income makes you work harder or work more. So most of us already stretched thin, it can be exhausting, but more income doesn't necessarily mean more hours. As you grow, you can raise your prices. You can potentially hire people. You can focus on high impact work, build better systems. So more money can actually come from less doing, not more hustling. And making money can be easy if we believe it is easy. So I want to pause here and maybe just, pop it into the chat and say what block feels most familiar to you, right? If you don't want to note it in the chat, note it privately. If you see multiple blocks, you're not alone. But I'd love to know, is it, the hard work or is it fear of success? Is it impact versus money? Is it perfectionism paralysis? Yeah, it's perfection I see here.
I was going to say there is a poll just in case anyone hasn't noticed. I can see there's quite a lot of answers.
Oh,
Feel free to
amazing.
add your answers. Yeah, I was just teeing that up while you were doing the last slide there.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, the answer I expected the most of them is about no one pay that price. Yeah, it seems to be.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to see, because everyone has money blocks and it's something not talked about enough. Just our psychology or our money mindset, and sometimes can seem a bit too woo-woo. But it's actually real. And there's a lot of research in financial therapy specific to financial psychology has been showing up for, financial planners, for counselors, for coaches, et cetera, and even in education as well. Okay, so I will leave the poll to you, Jamie. Is that right?
Yeah, do you want to see it? I can share it quickly if you want to see it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, yeah. Give me 2 secs. I'll put it up on the screen. Okay, there we go. Hopefully you can see that. So more than almost half of everybody who answered has chosen no one will pay that price. So that's sort of one of the highest ones. But I mean, there's oh, is it maybe because it's an invisible screen? Hang on, I know this sounds silly, just give me 2 secs. I think it's because Zoom like hides Zoom windows. Wait, let me just
Ah,
if I end I'm not gonna end the poll because if I end the poll I don't want to lose the results. Give me a second. Bit of tech on the fly. There we go. Okay. And I'm gonna end the poll. I'll share results. Can I share that here?
oh, there we go. Yeah, I see it now. I
See
think
that?
everyone should see it.
Yeah, you can see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the no one will pay that price. It's a common one. Um, but as I said, so many people have not just one, it can be multiple, right? And these are just some of the most common ones I've seen, but there's others too, where, one, for example, is it's too easy. If I can do it easily, why should I charge for it, right? So there's so many other ones that can show up. We could only choose
Yeah.
one, yes, but yeah.
I think one I've experienced sometimes as well is people think about a competitor and they think, oh, if they charge that amount, then there's no way I could charge more as well. They kind of they
Yeah.
benchmark themselves against others, even though maybe what they offer is it could be a better service or a different thing or more value or something. So yeah,
Absolutely. The competitor one's a huge one too. And oftentimes we feel like we've got to benchmark ourselves around what competitors are doing. Otherwise, everyone's going to, going to ask about, well, what's the value that you bring, right? How come I can get it for cheaper?
yeah.
Okay, so before we go into how your pricing behavior shows up, um, in action, we need to zoom out. Now, am I still sharing my screen?
No, I think where I shared the poll results, it might have taken that away. So
Okay, let's see if you can see it now.
Yep, it's there again.
Okay, amazing. So, yeah, as I mentioned, before we go into how our pricing behavior shows up in action, I just want to zoom out a little and understand get us to understand the engine underneath, which is your money mindset. And your money mindset isn't just a thought, it's those deeply embedded beliefs, right? Mostly in the subconscious. And your pricing behavior is just a symptom. So the root lies in your mindset and more specifically in the stories you've absorbed. But here's what it can look like in practice, right? If you've internalized a scarcity mindset, so maybe scarcity was your family looked at money, as never being enough, or it was hard to earn. You'll likely undercharge or feel anxious, quoting rates, and you'll worry that high prices will scare people away. If you carry an abundance mindset, you'll feel more ease charging based on value and trust that aligns with the clients that are around you, or that'll also attract the clients that exist. If you struggle with worthiness, you might discount automatically, you might avoid visibility, or you might hold back from claiming your expertise. You might even underplay your expertise, right? A strong value mindset, on the other hand, allows you to price based on outcomes, not just for your hours or your effort, and you hold those prices with calm conviction. So your money mindset also impacts whether you fully show up or hide, how confidently you follow up with warm leads, whether you price strategically or emotionally, how you'll, whether you price strategically or emotionally, but also how sustainable your energy is as you grow. And it can also trigger the imposter syndrome or sabotage, especially when things start to succeed. So, before we go into the pricing red flags or like some recalibration tools, I want to just ask this question that's on the screen, which is, what beliefs have I allowed to live in my subconscious, and are they serving the kind of business I want to run? If you want to share any thoughts that show up, feel free to, but otherwise, just sit with that question. There is a workbook and a worksheet that has these questions, which I'll share with Jamie and Yasas afterwards, and everyone can have access to that, and you can take your time to kind of reflect through some of these questions, because I know they can be quite, they're not just once and done, or something you can do in just 60 seconds. So what beliefs have I allowed to live in my subconscious, and are they serving the kind of business I want to run? Oops, sorry, I don't know what's happened here. Okay, feel free to add anything in there. And I'm going to keep going on because I'm just mindful of time, but in case, pop it into the chat, and then we can see what shows up. So, what can we do? As I mentioned earlier, we all have a money OS, and the first step is to try and uncover your money profile. So a money profile highlights your unique money patterns. It's a great tool to build awareness of what you may not know consciously. There are a few powerful money personality tests out there. One of the most famous one is actually from Brad Klontz, who covers financial psychology and the concept of money scripts. I myself am certified in a specific framework that maps out 8 core money personality types. And it's part of what makes your larger money OS. So in most assessments, everyone has a top money profile. And I'm going to just kind of share how, the one that I'm certified in has top 3 that tends to come up. And that knowing this helps you identify patterns and that drive your pricing behavior, but also how you think, feel, and behave around money in life and business. So for me, in my assessment, I'm a ruler first, then a nurturer, and then a maverick. So my ruler side is extremely ambitious, growth-driven, visionary, but I'm prone to burnout and also over-delivering. My nurturer side, being very deeply caring, service-led, often undercharges and struggles with boundaries. And my third part is my maverick, and it's usually my rule breaker. I go against traditional pricing strategies. I resist structure. And just knowing this helps me as I'm putting forward proposals. It helps me to kind of signal in and go sit in with myself and go, which side am I, where am I leaning in towards? Am I leaning in towards my ruler side, and therefore I'm going to be over delivering and maybe not charging what I think, what I really should, what my value is, or my nurture side, where I struggle with boundaries and I, again, give more, and maybe also sometimes discount or feel like I should lower my price because I want to help someone. So every profile has gifts and blind spots, whether it's this profile assessment or any other profile assessment. But one of the things is being able to do a money assessment or a money profile. There's many out there, but the goal here isn't just to change who you are. It's really about building more self-awareness so you can lead your pricing behavior with that awareness versus on autopilot. So understanding your money profile helps you how see how you do money, how you be with money, and how you see money, right? And it's just an additional tool that helps you to start pricing from clarity and confidence. So next up, it's about money stories. This is a massive part of the Money OS, right? And it's really something that I would encourage you all to take time to work through. It's the narratives that we've inherited or internalized. Maybe it's things like, money doesn't grow on trees. I heard that a lot growing up, or we can't afford that, or rich people are greedy, or artists don't make money. Maybe even do what you love and the money will flow, right? So I want to just take a couple of, maybe 60 seconds, or if we have a little bit more, to just jot down for you guys to jot down. And again, feel free to share it in the chat if you're comfortable. But what are one or two messages you heard about growing up? So feel free to write it in there. Again, it could be something, as I said, just a lot of people I know grew up hearing money doesn't grow on trees. Yeah, all four, Tanu. Oh, hi, Tanu. Yeah, we can't afford it. Definitely, definitely. Yeah. Okay, so after today's session, I'd really love for you to kind of reflect more and use the workbook and think about how might these stories be playing out in my pricing today, right? That's really critical to understand what is the starting point that you're at right now when it comes down to your pricing. So another thing I want to just touch on is around the co-founder money dynamic. If some of you are in a co-founding relationship or in a partnership, this tool will not just help you, but also help conversations with you and your co-founders. So I've had this experience with my past co-founders. We've had very different money stories. We've had very different money beliefs. On one level, one could be operating from an abundance mindset. So you're more comfortable charging the premium rates, but then your co-founder maybe has a fear of rejection or loss and therefore insists on keeping things affordable. So, this is a really great tool, or thinking about each of your co-founders' money OS and having that conversation is helpful, because then you're not seeing them as disagreements. They're really the emotional and psychological differences in your money OS. And the more awareness you have, the less personal those conflicts feel, and the more you can build that mutual respect instead of misalignment. So there's 7 key red flags, and I'll kind of walk through this because I want to be able to get to some Q&A. But the 7 red flags of misalignment is, first off, justification spiral. So this is when you're always adding something more. You're signaling to your clients that your core offer isn't valuable enough. And this leads to scope creep, it's burnout, and it attracts clients who value the extras more than your actual expertise. The second red flag is around this, like what I call a convincing monologue, and you try to over-explain your rates, right? You're rattling off your credentials, or you're desperately trying to prove your worth, and therefore you're showing up as you're coming from insecurity rather than certainty. The third is this resentment built up, right? It's like that sort of knot in your stomach where you look at your project fee after they've signed off, and the client's calling you constantly saying, I just need one quick thing, or do you have a moment? right? These are internal integrity alarms that are signaling your pricing is misaligned with the energy that you're expending. The fourth is energy drain. So when your pricing is misaligned, every project becomes an energy deficit. And I felt this multiple times. And you start dreading client calls, you procrastinate on deliverables, and you start resenting the work you used to love. And it impacts not just your income, but your creativity and your innovation. The fifth is you compromise results, right? You're undercharging, which leads to sometimes less powerful client and when clients invest at a level that feels significant to them, they actually show up different. They're more committed, they're more engaged, and ultimately more transformed by your work. The sixth is preemptive discount. So offering discounts before they, ask devalues your work and trains clients to expect reduced rates always when they renew or if they come back to you, right? It's anticipating rejection and shrinking before it happens and abandoning yourself, before anyone else. And lastly is the resistance to growth. You refuse to raise your rates despite increased expertise, results, and it's often coming as fear disguised as accessibility. So it keeps you playing small and prevents you from investing in the resources that help you serve at that higher level. So after today's session, take some time to really think about how this shows up. And this is another part of where your recalibration work can continue. So there's 3 additional questions that I'm also going to share in the worksheet, but I'll quickly walk them through. These can help with recalibrating your pricing. The first is, what do I want my pricing to say about my brand, right? Your pricing is a signal, and it's a signal for what you stand for. So if you value excellence, does your pricing reflect that? If you value access, have you built that intentionally, or are you still just undercharging? So there's a couple additional questions in the worksheet that will help you dig deeper into these recalibration questions. And it's a really great additional step to, the Money OS and then the finding the red flags in your misaligned pricing. The second question is, what am I done tolerating, right? This is really about boundaries. As someone who struggle with boundaries to this day, right? This is really important. And I keep asking myself this, every quarter, right? Maybe I'm done letting, clients negotiate rates or saying yes when your body's saying no, or offering more just because you want to be liked, or feeling bad, right? So here it's really asking yourself, what are you done tolerating in your pricing behavior? Next up is the third and final question. Where am I still shrinking, and what would expansion look like? So shrinking looks like, apologizing after saying your rate, or talking yourself down before you've even quoted, or discounting, before you ask. That's the most common one. And expansion doesn't mean necessarily doubling your rate overnight, but it does mean saying your price clearly and holding your boundary and trusting that the right people are going to meet you there. So the deeper question there is what would pricing look like if I truly trusted my work? Just remember, pricing is energy, leadership, and boundaries. When you price from alignment, you attract people who respect your time, your talent, and your transformation. When you price from fear, you invite confusion, resentment, and compromise. So, think about what is the kind of leadership you're pricing from right now. I've got a couple additional tools here, and, other part that I, feel and see most often is really how we communicate our pricing with confidence. How you say your price is just as important as what you charge. When you communicate from grounded confidence, it builds trust. And these are just some example scripts where, it allows you could practice it. I suggest speaking it out loud, practicing your scripts to be able to say it confidently. For example, if you're, in the coaching business, right? When someone asks after you've done your proper discovery, you've taken time to understand their goals, you can say, this package is designed to X outcome over time, and the investment is X. If it feels aligned, we can explore next steps. That's it. And just really hold that, hard, and say it with conviction and with confidence. Because you want to deliver your price like you mean it, like you own it, because confidence is 50% of what you say and 50%, of how you hold yourself, right? When you share your price, pause, let it land. Oftentimes we start wanting to, over explain or talk more or whatever, but just pause, try it and practice it again in the mirror, right? Let it land. And that energy teaches your client how to value you. When you stay calm, clear, and grounded, it sends them a signal. I believe in this, and they will then too. Um, so if you get questions like clients are like, why is this so much? Or can you discount? Again, don't head to over explaining, or, it's natural to sort of freeze as well. But stay calm, offer some scope shifts. I never offer discounts. I end up removing things from my scope instead. Also redirect the conversation to outcomes, and don't dive into that proving mode or justification spiral. I've also shared, some additional sample scripts here as examples. These will also be in the workbook. But it's just, again, ways for you to have something, or equip you with some tools and practice, if you can, with your partner, or with your next client conversation. Just work on some scripts and be able to express it, confidently as well. So lastly, two additional tools, is some check-in questions that you can think about pricing or future pricing. So if I fully trust my work, what would I charge? Again, all of these are going to be in the workbook, and definitely spend some time reflecting. And then if you're in a co-founding relationship, these are some perfect reflection questions to start and talk about each of your money OSs and what financial behaviors may trigger you and how that may show up. I'm going to pause there, because I know that we want to make time for Q&A, and I'm just conscious of time. Really, the last message I want to say is that if you take nothing else from this, right, let it be this one thing, which is pricing is not about proving your worth. I really hate it when people say, price what you're worth, because you are already worthy. And it's, no longer about pricing yourself to someone else's fear, someone else's money blocks or approval needs. You are not here to hustle harder. You are here to be well paid, well respected, and well resourced. And you deserve pricing that honors your energy, your ethics, and your expertise. So thank you. And I'm going to pause for any questions, considerations, etc. Jamie, I know we went a little bit over, but
It's okay. No. There's all really good content, and of course, obviously the audience have all been kind of participating throughout as well. So thanks everyone for sharing, your own experiences. We'd love to hear a little bit more. There is a Q&A question in there, which I think was related to a couple of slides ago, saying, "Hi Grace, how can I work out my money profile?" I wondered if is there like something online in particular that does that kind of thing? Is it kind of like one of those sort of Myers-Briggs assessment type things, or is it more some other type of analysis for that?
yeah, so I'm happy to give everyone here like a free money profile, and you get a report, and also happy to do like a 30-minute one-to-one session. This is just one of them. Like I mentioned, Brad Klontz, he's a very well-known one. He talks about money scripts. And, if happy to share other resources as well, because this is a topic that actually even banks are now starting to talk about, especially in the US. So feel free to reach out. I have my contact details here. And happy to just mention Doer Circle, and I'm happy to share other resources.
Yeah, and I think something I thought about, just what you mentioned at the end as well, around, your worthiness, and it's absolutely true. I think what can unfortunately happen sometimes, that we've experienced with members giving us feedback, and I've experienced working in previous roles and things, is that those who are working independently, be it solopreneurs, fractional executives, freelancers, so on, like, there's a perception sometimes from the employing side, the business that wants to use your services, that, okay, well, because I don't have to pay things like, maybe I don't have to make pension contributions, or I don't have to pay certain taxes or certain benefits, therefore the price can be lower. But the reality is as an individual, you still have all your own overheads. And so we always sort of try to remind people that even if you are working independently, you're still a one-person business in that sense, and you have to factor all those things in to
Yeah.
your value as well. It's not just about the skill set and everything.
Absolutely. And, you know, even if we do spreadsheets, I mean, look, I've tried every app, every tool. I've, you know, managed and tracked my spreadsheets, but this is something that is a block, right? Why aren't we tracking? What is it that stops us from tracking, right? Is it that we don't like to see money going out of our account, right? Or we struggle to, you know, oftentimes people are like, I don't know my finances enough, or I'm not good with finances. I've said that. But there are other things that are subconsciously holding us. And that's where psychology, it's meeting both the tactical and the practical with the psychological side. And unless you're able to break those with any type of change, right? Whether it's losing weight or dieting or changing your habits, we've always got to start with the psychological, because that's really that deeper layer.
Grace, thanks for the presentation, the great insights, great advice as always. Just one question that I was thinking about. I think you mentioned about the competitor pricing, and then someone mentioned that in the comments. Maybe if we can go a bit deeper on competitor pricing, Grace. I guess that's one of the kind of thoughts that you have before presenting a price to a client, right? What would the competitors quote this client, and then you want to kind of be in the range of the competitors' prices, depending on how crowded the market is. Can we maybe talk a bit about how you would kind of approach that competition and their prices, and what a client potentially would say about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think on the one hand, it's understanding what is the value always, right? It's coming down to what is the value in the transformation. And I think oftentimes when we're looking at value pricing, value-based pricing, we're looking at the immediate value, but we're not actually looking at the longer transformation that we're seeing, that the client's going to have. Maybe it's not just the 6 months, maybe it's 12 months later, or maybe it's a, you know, full year later that it's going to have significant ripple effects on them, right? So oftentimes we're only pricing, and we're talking about that pricing on that initial immediate short-term impact that they may see, but not the longer term. So, you know, even on the client base or in the competitor side, it's like these standards were built by someone else, but it doesn't mean they can't be broken. There's always, you know, if it's not us breaking, or if it's not, say, me and my company going to break what that competitor baseline is, maybe someone else is going to come out and break that baseline. So I look at it as it's helpful to understand what the competitor pricing is, but we should really be able to speak into what is the value that we're providing and what is the outcome. And again, I do think it comes down to how we own it and we're confident in it. We are confident in the transformation that we're going to give, right? And the tools and the products. And that signals body language, tone, eye contact, right? And just kind of pausing, right? And it's uncomfortable because we want the sale or we want the deal, right? But then when you get one, you're like, wow, actually, it's not the price, because price is very subjective, right? Like to you, what's cheap versus me, and to someone else versus another. I think it's hard when you're also thinking about cultural contexts, because in Singapore, it's a very price sensitive market, just generally. So I think acknowledging that, but not, you know, playing to the same level field of discounting. When I worked with ESOP or ASOP, so for those of you, when I had my first company, Agent Grace, it was a brand management, go-to-market, PR, sales. We had two arms to the business. And ESOP or ASOP, the skincare brand, was actually one of my first clients that I brought on a retainer level. And they really showed, you know, me the value of valuing your brand. They never discounted. They never offered freebies in the sense of like, buy this and get X, right? They never had that. And they never have, maybe now to this day, because they've been obviously bought out like a couple of years back, but they really owned that. And it was hard for the first few years of their business, but over time they got known for that. And people never expected a sale. People never expected a discount. Other ways that we can do it is that instead of offering discounts, it could be, you know, a credit for something, or, you know, an additional service that they can get in a bundled package for a certain price. But it's never about lowering. right? The price per se, it's about, you know, being able to add value, but then also, you know, bearing in mind what that's saying about, you know, the person that's, what the person that's speaking, who you're speaking to, is also thinking from their own money beliefs, right? I hope that helps a little.
Thanks. And JB, we have a question in Q&A.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions actually. One that was in the chat actually first, from Ishira as well, saying, how do we find a sweet spot in pricing for many? Money is a struggle right now, and is it about offering a sliding scale? And that's what they're doing currently at the moment.
Yeah, so you know, I think definitely right now there's a lot of challenges with people wanting to spend. You know, but there are people still spending, right? There are people still buying and paying for things for, you know, ridiculous prices, right? So I think it also depends who you're serving here, you know, and also who you want to serve, right? Understanding who it is that you're serving and what you want to serve. So for example, if we're serving minorities as an example, or, you know, emerging founders and startups, right? There's obviously a different pricing scale, but it's also understanding just everything needs to start with, I'm doing this and it's not coming from my money blocks. It's not coming from my money beliefs. I acknowledge my money blocks. I am aware of my money stories, and that, you know, being able to know that. So I think it's, again, depending on your business, it's really hard to say like what to do, right? I would almost look at who are you serving, and what are they willing, like not willing to pay per se, but what have they paid for from you in the past, right? And also where are you and your business right now to date? And where do you want to take your business, right? Both for your own self, if you're a personal solopreneur, or if you're an organization, from a revenue perspective.
Yeah, it's a great answer. And I just wanted to add just one little point as well, because I've been doing kind of sales and business development for well over a decade now, and it's hard, right? When you're pitching businesses and stuff, quite often people will say, oh, we don't have budget for that. But a lot of the time the subtext of that kind of statement is that they just haven't yet identified the value it can offer. And the reality is if you can meet each other on a level where they can see the value, that you develop kind of the project along with them as a champion, they will find the budget. You know, they'll knock on the CFO's door if they need to and say, right, we need this. Let's take it from somewhere else in that sense, or let's see if we can get a sponsor. So that's not to say that what you're offering isn't valuable right now, but it's just sometimes about positioning as well. And a lot of the great tips you've shared today, Grace, can help that. I think that confidence and understanding where it can.
Absolutely. And actually, you know, like I just saw Ishira, you mentioned it, sound healing. Sound healing, people are paying anything from $10,000. You know, I'm again, right? Like what I've seen in the sound healing space and the well-being space, there are people who are charging outrageous amounts, right? So to Jamie's point as well, I think like definitely the story, right? People buy what you do, right? Like they're buying the why behind everything. And when we start talking about, you know, the tactical, the practical, people start wanting to dig deeper into that, right? And that's when they start being nitty gritty, nitty picky about it all, right? And so like just being aware of that. And sometimes it's like maybe you're not speaking to the right audience, or in the right spaces to where the audience you want to attract is, because there is a buyer for every price, right? And I think that kind of answers like there's a question here, right? For new startup that's trying to acquire your first client, do you recommend pricing lower at the start of the journey? So I think there's a couple of additional questions there that I would have, you know, is one, what's the level of experience and expertise, or the people behind the team, that sort of stuff. You know, what are you currently building? But when I first started, I chose brands that I was aligned with and that I wanted to be aligned with, right? And I was very, very particular about targeting those brands because I knew those were the types of brands I wanted to work for. And, you know, I So I positioned myself, and as Jamie said, you know, I told my story, got more context, I tried to get my foot in the door, try to understand more. And oftentimes when we're selling, we tend to be selling, here, look what we do, look at my credentials, all of this, when actually what we should be doing is getting more context first, really asking as many questions, because then we can sell to what they've just said is their problem or what they need help with, right? Instead of kind of coming in and being like, look at my presentation, look what we've done, look at the logos I've collected. So again, sometimes it's about reframing. It's not often just about the pricing per se, if that makes sense as well.
Yeah, what's that? I can't remember if I've got the tactic specifically right, but it's something like the 5 whys. And it's something we do as kids. Like literally, if anyone here has children, I have 2 boys, like quite often they'll ask you a question and you'll explain the answer and then they'll say why. And they'll say why again. And ultimately you want to get with that person to the very nub of the core of the issue, which could be something else. It might, you know, for example, the service level might be, I want to lose weight, and it'd be why. But I want to be healthier. Why? Because I want to live long enough so that my children, you know, I can spend quality time with them and so on. Like, and then when you get to that bigger pain, that's when you're in a point where you can then start to offer value and get into that detail. And I think that's something, you know, if you hear something in this conversation, dig into it. You know, don't just go to the next point. Like really, you know, be curious, and you'll get some gold out of that. I think there's a couple of questions here. Sorry, I just wanted to add a couple of bits as well, because I've gone through this journey as well, like a lot, and I can appreciate it's tough. We have Mega. There's a question here as well. So she said, "Hi Grace, could you suggest a few ways to arrive at a pricing package?" So coming up with packages, I guess, and how do we get to this value? I know you kind of touched on that a little bit already.
Yeah, I mean, again, I feel like I think you know, we're seeing this more where it's around value based and transformation. So what is the transformation worth, right? To that person? What is the transformation? What are you getting them from A to Z? And again, I don't know the industry, like I'm giving blanket sort of overview here, but like, you know, depending on who you're serving, again, what your offer is, whether it's you know, coaching, whether it's an actual tech platform, those are 2 very different things as well. But thinking about overall the transformation and the value, if you are a coach or a consultant, you know, pricing by hour, I just don't agree with. It's really about outcomes and you know, the deliverables that you're going to provide versus hours. I think hours is harder, and then it becomes really tough as well for you, because it can tend to lead more to burnout. So yeah, I would say, like, again, if it's coaching, just do packages more so than you know, one-offs, right? It's always better to try and get that package, and they're able to see the transformation more deeply versus just within one-off sessions. And sorry, one thing I want to add too is, like, I just don't think we should ever convince clients, right? Or try and convince them, because you know, it's that whole thing of, if we're trying to show our worth, we're going to start over explaining. We're going to start talking about our credentials. We're going to start everything. We're just going to keep adding and adding and adding to show that we are worthy of their time, of their business, right? And it's really just, you know, if you can go into things, whether it's even interviews, right? I always like to go in being like, I've got this. And even if I don't have this, I'm okay, right? If I don't make the sale, I'm okay. And just knowing that attracts a very different energy, right? And there's so much research around this, that if we are energetically confident and have conviction, more abundance opens to us. So just want to emphasize that.
Yeah, Megan added, she said it's coaching as well, and she realizes that hours can lead to burnout as well. So yeah, thanks for sharing that context. Then we have a question from Tanu as well. A little preface as well, saying, "Hi Grace, you look lovely per usual, nice to see you. My question is, what's a great way to sense your client's money belief over discovery calls? How does one figure the money alignment sooner?"
Hi, Tanu. It's so good to see you. Well, I can't see you, but nice to see you here. So what's a great way to sense your client's money belief over discovery calls? That's a good question. You know, over time, you'll start recognizing. So right now, because I've been, certified in these assessments, I can see. And if you've been certified in other tools like Myers-Briggs or Enneagram, you start seeing certain tendencies, right? There are certain questions you could ask. And again, I think it's just like, going into these conversations with clients as if you're wanting to know just as much about them as they should about you. That will help you to gather, more insights, right? But the money alignment, I would say, it's harder because you're not obviously going to profile them for their money assessment. But really, you could probably gauge after a while whether this client is going to be hard work. Like if someone's always asking for a discount, right? Is that a type of client you want to work with? I always think, right? Client you work with, who do you attract, right? And when you write that down, it's something that you have there so that when you go into a conversation with any client, you can know, okay, I want a client that understands and I don't have to over explain. I want a client, I mean, obviously it's an ideal list, right? But we always got to start somewhere. The other is also providing briefing documents beforehand, or briefing forms or discovery forms beforehand, to even ask on a sliding scale, if you weren't to hire me, what would you do? Right? And give them options, right? Or if you were to, what's your budget? Again, I don't always like to ask what they're willing to pay, because I think, again, pricing is very, individual. But there are ways you can ask on a sliding scale, 1 to 5. If you weren't investing with me, what would you do? 2, what else have you invested in? Right? How have you made changes in the past? Have you worked with a coach before? These sort of things, because sometimes we end up working with people who always want more. That's just their style. And they could be an accumulator because they're frugal. So that's another archetype where the accumulators are fantastic with numbers, but very frugal. So I would look at discovery forms or briefing forms that you can help to self-filter or pre-filter.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Good question. We had one from Nicholas as well, which I was hoping didn't get lost into the chat because it was a bit of back and forth. So Nicholas had shared, when he receives inbound leads, so people coming to him first that want to work, they tend to be more receptive to his prices. However, when he goes outbound and he's sort of proactively reaching out to people, he finds he's at a disadvantage in negotiations. So any tips on what he can do to be more comfortable standing firm on prices?
Amazing. Hey, Nicholas. Gosh, it's been ages too. So I love this question because it highlights 2 things. One is, the power of pull versus the power of push, right? I'm a huge believer as well in marketing, in the power of pull versus the power of push. So power of pull is that you're attracting the clients because of your stories, the way you talk, the way you're, sharing, the way you just, your brand represents itself. Power of push is really like you're selling, you're out there, you're trying to get as many, deals happening. It's kind of like hustling, and it can sometimes feel a bit slimy, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it is, but this is a perfect example of if you're showing up and you're showing up with that conviction and confidence, right? You are getting the right leads. That means what you're doing is bringing in the type of clients that you want. So I don't know if that's a problem. I feel like that's a really good thing. And maybe it's more that you want more inbound leads. Like if it's about going out to those that you want to speak to, I would say, are the ones that you're speaking to the clients that you want? Like, are they brands or businesses that you really, really want to work with? And what have been the considerations or concerns from their end? And then, yeah, I'd probably dig deeper into that a little bit. But I'd say for being more comfortable standing firm on price, honestly, practice. Like just before you go, that works. I also believe in emotional freedom technique, which if anyone wants to, it's really about, like, I do it every time before I go on stage. I did it before today because as much as I love, talking, I also get very nervous, but it's like, even though I fear I'm going to, mess up my speaking, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And it works. It's actually, again, scientifically researched and all of this stuff, but practice, and having very clear statement of how you say your price.
Just want to add another thing on that as well, just from a sales point of view, is because that's the conundrum every salesperson has, which is you want inbound opportunities, because inbound, they're already sort of self-qualifying to an extent, and outbound, you're going and maybe bothering somebody that's never heard of you before and saying, hey, you need this. And I think you just have to be comfortable with the fact that there's a buying cycle. Everyone goes on a buying cycle, and it's awareness, it's interest, consideration, decision, right? So the likelihood is that some of those people you go outbound to, they're earlier in the buying cycle, so they haven't yet thought, I have a problem, I need a solution. So what you want to do there is to try and nurture that by giving value, right? Talk to them about what you can do, your credentials. If you can, obviously, you've got maybe testimonials from your previous clients as well. That can be a way that you can also generate that. But ultimately, it's great that you're getting inbound opportunities, because that shows also that people are interested in what you want to do. So keep at the outbound though, don't give up on it, but just try where you can to nurture that, and maybe don't put as much pressure on yourself that's not always going to convert as strongly as inbound.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, Natalie, yeah, very welcome. Yeah, thanks for joining. It's just my message as well. Any other questions? I know we've gone over a couple of minutes, but just at last, any points to wrap up? Grace, you want to just share on the screen again quickly your contact info, just so people haven't forgot it?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to chat pop it in the chat if that works. Is that easier?
Yeah.
I saw someone, I'm just looking through some of the messages to try and catch up, but I'll pop it in the chat because I think someone asked to put it in there as well.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I should add as well.
reach out anytime.
Yeah, Evelina, sorry, I know you joined us for the first time today, so thanks for joining in. And I did see your comment as well. There wasn't a question I could kind of tee up in that sense, but I'm sure Grace will take a look at that as well.
Oh, sorry, I just sent it.
When you
I
guys
can't seem to send my message to everyone, but I just sent it to you, Jamie, and yes, sorry. But it's just Grace at Grace Clapham. I just saw another message pop up here.
Yeah, by default, for some reason, it will send. I've done that before. It sends to hosts
Sorry.
and panelists. Yeah. I think I did that when I was replying to someone before a couple of weeks ago, and then I didn't realize I didn't see it. So the joys of Zoom. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, great. And hopefully everyone enjoyed the session. I know I got a lot out of it as well. So thanks again, Grace. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Grace. It was great.
Thank you both. And thanks everyone. And appreciate all of your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.